Every day, we go through the motions, doing our jobs, living the new normal, and trying to keep it all together. Hi, I'm Amber Kraft, and this is the Afterthought, a podcast designed to light your internal fire as we speak with those who have been in the trenches and dug their way back out. So sit back and relax, because you're not going down this road alone anymore. The sponsor of today's episode is Intentional Media, LLC. Now, I've worked with them for the past 6 months to help develop my personal strategy for growth towards my goals for this coming year. They manage the everyday entrepreneur, author, influencer, and small business owner, and a whole bunch of others. Now, they offer a wide range of intuitive services designed to grow your concepts and influence or your existing business in a meaningful way that helps amplify your efforts and turn your passion into profit. Intentional Media LLC offers logo design, branding, if you've seen my website development, social media management, coaching, and so much more. Now, for 2021, their focus is on self-discipline and how to create impact in business by addressing things that prevent massive action in your life, such as your time management, your sleep, your procrastination, your mental health, and so much more. I will have their information in the show notes down below. You can email them and start your growth today. And without further ado, let's get on to this episode. Hello, and welcome to the Afterthought Podcast, where we talk to authors who have been there and succeeded through different obstacles they've got in life, be it the typical family and life issues or more. So today I have with me the lovely Marla Holt. Now, would you tell us a little bit about yourself before I go and gush myself?
Sure. So I am a romance author. I've written 8 books so far, published 8 books so far. I'm working on my 9th and 10th, and I live in Kansas. I've got 3 boys, husband, live in the middle of nowhere. We've got some chickens. And I work outside the house too. So full life.
That it is. I think that's one of the reasons I first fell in love with your books, and because you were one of the first authors that was on my radar, and it's like, okay, well, she has the whole kids and family and farm like I do, or did at the time, and is still able to write. So this is somebody I'm definitely gonna let's see if I like her writing and see, and I read that was right when you came out with The Other Lane, and
Okay.
yeah, and I didn't know you wrote like the trilogies at the time, so I was like, okay, this is a good book, and I like it. And then the next one came out, and I was like, okay, I'll keep reading. And then I found out there was a book 0, and I'm like, wait, now I gotta go all the way back, and that just made me even more curious. First off, do you write the entire series first and then quick release?
So I've done it a couple of different ways, like with the Try Again series, which was my first trilogy. They're all standalones. So I kind of wrote those. I mean, I knew I was going to have those stories when I started Ethan and Juliet, but they're also standalone that I just kind of wrote them. I think I wrote one in 2016, one in 2017, one in 2018. That's they all came out all spaced out, and I didn't have to worry about overlap between the series because they're all very much can stand on their own.
Yeah.
The Incident series is a little bit different because even though they're standalones, they're very interconnected. The stories all sort of show the different characters' perspectives that kind of center around a central event. So those I wrote all at once. Over the course of 6 months, I wrote all the first drafts, and then I rapid released them kind of, but 2 months apart instead. I know some authors will rapid release over 2 months.
Yeah.
All 3, but this was so for me that was rapid release 2 months apart over the spring and summer of 2020.
I was gonna say, because I was looking at I look at all the release dates to see what the patterns are and things. It's well, even the Instant series was released, like you said, so March, May, July, October. But then you kind of did that with the Try Again series. I was like, well, maybe I've got to try to figure out this quick release stuff. Like, I want to eventually get there, but my books are way too long to do that without like having 4 or 5 ahead and edited and everything.
Yeah. Well, and it's a lot of doing that was juggling a lot of different stages of writing at the same time. So I'd be like, while I was drafting The Betrayal Incident, which is the last book in the Incident series, I was also like, I also had the first book at the editor, and the second book was going through beta as I was putting the finishing touches on the first drafts of this. And so I was having, and at the same time, everything is so interconnected with those stories. I was having to go back and make sure that things that I wasn't contradicting myself in storyline, or so it was a lot of moving parts to get all of that together and out so quickly, which in retrospect, I'm glad I did it. But I don't know that I will do a push like that again, just because it was a little, if I hadn't have been laid off from my job for 6 months due to the pandemic, I don't think I would have been able to make it work with my daily life.
Yeah, I have to say, I definitely wouldn't be able to keep all of that straight, and kid and work. Like, kudos. Okay, but you're at home, so you've got that extra little. Gotcha. Okay, that's the thing. Like, I forget, because I never had a day off, that we are in a pandemic, and some people do get to work from home. So, okay, that makes a little bit more sense now. Okay. So you have the Incident series and the Try Again series, and are we gonna call The Other Lane? Is that gonna be a series as well, or is that gonna stop just 1 and 2?
Yeah, no, that's basically a standalone with a prequel novella. I do like have in the back of my mind Reed, who's a character in The Other Lane, who I love, but doesn't, he kind of has I feel like his story is unfinished, so he might get a story someday. But yeah, I can't say too much about Reed because everybody gets a little bit heartbroken and angry at me. They're like, "Why did you do that?"
Yeah, I'm trying not to.
But anyway, so I feel like he has a story, but that would be like, it wouldn't continue out the series. It would
Right. Okay.
Someday.
So what has been, because obviously you've done like all these books already in the span of 2 years, 3 if you count maybe writing. What's been your greatest like help and resource with all of these series?
So, well, it's been a little bit longer. It took, I think I started, 2016 was like when I really started to like produce books. So it's been about 4 years, but so it hasn't been quite so compact. But just actually finding writing friends on the internet maybe was the biggest thing, just because writing is such a solitary activity. And I was, when I really started focusing more on my writing, I had an infant and a toddler preschooler, and then, my oldest kiddo is 14 now. He was like 10 at the time, but like, so
that's quite the ages at that time.
I was home with kids, all the time, and that was my primary. I transitioned out of the office 9-to-5 world back into the service industry, which is where my heart always has been. And I was working restaurant management at night, and in the evenings and during the day I was with my kids, and I was able to focus on my writing a little bit more through then. But it was very solitary. Like I had kids and mom things, and I had wife things, and I had work things, which was real fun because all of my work friends were like 21 and helping me keep up with all the new slang and trends and stuff. But I didn't have writing friends in real life. Like, all of the writing was very solitary, and I didn't have time to go out and meet people at coffee shops or be a part of any writers groups because my time was full between the kids and the job and all that stuff. So finding writing friends on the internet, a little bit through Facebook and Facebook groups, but mostly on Instagram and following some YouTubers just who would talk about their writing, because I'm kind of a lurker on YouTube. I will watch videos, but I don't like, I'm bad. I don't comment, or just because it's something I consume as I'm like moving. But yeah, finding writing friends on the internet and like finding that support structure of being like people who are looking forward to what you're producing next, or wanting to hear about it, or asking to be beta readers or ARC readers, or just like finding, putting yourself out there just a little bit enough to find people who you have interest in and who you can also help support. It was probably the one thing that really kept me going when I started, because I was very afraid to start. So
yeah, I think that's something we all, even if we hide it deep, we are all secretly afraid of, like, is it everybody gonna like my stuff? I think that's definitely what attracted me to you. Is like, I present this image at work like I'm out there and outgoing and confident because I know what I'm doing. But then when it comes to the writing, you're just like, I know no one. I'm already in this little bubble of kids and just life and family, and there's nobody that likes to do what I do and no one to talk to. And there's only so much you can talk to your spouse till they're like, would you just go do the thing? Like, what do you think has been like the biggest hiccup that you've had, other than the pandemic, because that was everybody's hiccup? But as far as just your writing journey, like, what's something that you've had to overcome that you didn't expect?
So in my past, so I have a creative writing degree. Like, that's what I went to school for. It's all, writing has like always been the only thing that I ever saw myself doing professionally. That's what I have my degree in. And coming from that background, where I feel like the writing journey is very prescribed and also very outdated when you're coming from that sort of rigid academic place. Mm-hmm. And so I was in that place for a long time, where when I finished school, and it took me a long time to finish school because of the older kiddo that I had when I was very young. So I didn't graduate college until I was 26, 27, anyway, in there. And so I came from that spot where these are the things that you write, and it's like always literary. It's always like, and it's based off of this like canon that you're taught everything about classic literature, and lots of stuff by dudes that is kind of boring. And
yeah, they are.
Sorry. My opinion. But, and then as you're moving forward, and then I was also graduating school like right as Kindles were starting to become a thing, and ebooks and the demand for affordable ebooks was just sort of kicking off the ground. So like being an independent author was very new and very taboo, especially for the academic world. So it's like only hacks do that. You can't do that. Like you have to go through this process of querying agents. You have to go and you have to write, genre fiction is bad. All these sort of things. So I sort of had to overcome all of that just to get around to where I felt like I belonged in the writing world, because I very much valued the education that I got. I feel like I learned a lot, and especially about like how to take criticism and how to revise and how to edit through school, and how to like really dive into myself to pull out words when I was having trouble writing, because school deadlines are always more brutal than any other deadline, right? But at the same time, I feel like that prescription of how to become an author, like even the writing teachers that I had were all traditionally published authors. And so, and it's like feeling like if you don't put in that time for all of the constant rejections, that
you haven't paid your dues.
Yeah, you haven't paid your dues, you're not a real author. And so like it took me a couple of years to even find myself as a romance author. Like after I graduated school, I was so burnt out on writing that I didn't write for a couple of years, didn't write for years after I graduated. And then, I sat down in 2014. I was like, I'm going to do NaNoWriMo this year. I'm going to write a book. I don't care. I haven't finished I haven't finished writing anything since I was like, I was in the middle of my school career because I took and even that was like very short and I didn't like it anymore. That's how it goes. So yeah, I hadn't finished anything but short stories and essays for school in a long time. So I was like, I'm going to sit down for NaNoWriMo. I'm going to write this book, and it's going to be whatever it's going to be. Like if it, I'm not going to try to make it. I'm not going to try to make it literary. I'm not going to try and do anything. I'm just going to sit down with these characters because the other lane is based off of a short story that I wrote in school, and it was like the only one I still liked. And the first chapter is very similar to that short story. It's, totally different, but it's kind of starts in that same place. And so I sat down and I wrote it, and it ended up being a romance when I was finished. And I was just like, well, and it took me a long time to like create and craft the full story after I finished that NaNoWriMo. But that was like the first year I won NaNoWriMo, and I was feeling very empowered by it. And I was like, you know what? This is a romance story that I wrote, and that's okay. And it was a lot of fun. So then when I sat down to write Ethan and Juliet was my first intentional romance story. Mm-hmm. So I was just like, okay, I'm going to write a romance on purpose this time and see where it gets me. And then I just like was having so much fun. And I was like, okay, you can give yourself permission to write what brings you joy and write where you're comfortable and enjoy yourself, even if like, and there's nothing wrong with this. And I was, and I was reading a lot of romance at the time, and I was finding so many like empowering characters and just themes that are kind of like almost hidden from the mainstream. I feel like because people who read romance a lot, they're in the know. It's a feminist genre, like or very much can be. Like there's so much in it about like having, especially since it's geared towards women, like having a safe place to talk about sex and intimacy and just the, our fears and things that we feel like are limiting us, and the characters moving forward despite those fears or despite those limitations and boundaries that have been placed on them. And that was exactly what I needed at the time, was just being like, no, I have the ability to create I have the ability to be an author, and I have the tools out there now. And sometimes those tools have changed from when I was in school, or, what the people who were teaching me in school learned, 20 years ago when they were in school. Right. And so that's kind of where I started. I had finished writing Ethan and Juliet and had started to draft Sparkle and Shine when I really started playing with the idea of self-publishing those books instead of querying them. So it was like overcoming all that ingrained things that I'd been taught in school about how you become a writer and what you're allowed to write. Because it was very prescribed, and it was very much like, these are what we're writing now, and this is what you should write. And sort of just like giving myself room to discover and come to the place where I found my own path and give myself permission to follow it.
Well, and I think that's good because first off, we know that there's gatekeepers in, the traditional setting. And I feel like when you go to school and do something like creative writing, then you have an extra set of gatekeepers, because you have those people telling you not only like from a publishing standpoint, no, you can't, or this is how it must be, but then it's people who have done it. So you feel like that extra pressure of, well, they know what they're talking about. So, and you want to close up. But I love the fact that an old story brought your love back, because it was kind of the same way. I mean, I wasn't doing creative writing, but I was getting my business degree while I wrote what no one will ever see as my first novel. And I think I wrote so much for school that I fell out of love in the writing of the book, and it just was not gonna be. But then when I got back into writing, once my infant at the time of writing that was older, then it was like, okay, well, I love this. I love the idea. I love the characters. Here's the version of it I did like. Let's go from there. So that's cool. I love that happened to you as well. But how do you come up with your ideas? Because I gotta tell you, the haunted attraction was the cutest. As a renovator, like, you had me. Like, the renovating house, like, you had me there. And then you throw ghosts into it, and it reminded me of, like, a Hallmark romance with like construction in it, and I loved it. So I need to know how you come up with your ideas.
Well, that's funny because I like that you say Hallmark romance, because to me, like, Haunted Attraction is my version of a Christmas book.
Yeah.
Give me ghosts, and I'm like, yes. um, so it's very intentional when I come up with my story ideas. Usually I'm, in a place where I'm ready to start a new project, and I have so I sort of just sit down and figure out what it is I want to write about. And it usually starts with the characters. So like Haunted Attraction, I actually started writing Haunted Attraction in 2016, which is why it's set in 2016.
Man, you made me wait that long.
And
It's fine. I didn't know, so we're okay. Only
yeah, I started it for NaNoWriMo in 2016, and I had to set it aside because that was I had a 3-month-old baby. I was transitioning out of my office job and into the restaurant job, and those jobs overlapped for a couple of months. And that I started.
That's a full plate alone.
Yeah, that was during November of 2016, and so it was just like, okay, story has to be set by the wayside. So I think I only wrote a couple of chapters in it in the beginning of 2016, and then, but I always had it in the back of my mind where I'm like, I really want to start this, just because I really love the heroine. Like, starting off with the bisexual heroine is something I like, especially at the time, had not really seen very much of, and was looking for. And then just I had this idea for a dual timeline story, which is also something I really enjoy reading, but I don't see a lot of, especially in romance. Like, every now and then, like in women's fiction or in literary fiction, you'll see sort of that dual timeline, but I had never really
seen that perfectly, by the way. I honestly don't like dual timelines because, in my opinion, they are too much cut back and forth. But yours was just enough of the story on both sides to keep me fully invested, because by the time I was like, I wonder why, then you were jumping instead of just head hopping back and forth.
Right. Oh yeah. So yeah, I also get frustrated when people hop back and forth too much. So I'm glad that balance worked out. So so I was like, okay, so I'm gonna write a story with a bisexual heroine. I want there to be ghosts, and I want it to be a dual timeline. So then it just sort of all came together from there. And yeah, so I had that was probably one of the most fun books I've ever written, just because it played into my favorite sort of indulgences, like with the haunted house. But then, like with Van Birch, like I sat down to write that whole series. It was just like, okay, so I was actually, the Van Birch incident was the first story that I sat down to write with, I'm going to publish this myself, because I had written most of the other books that I have published at that point. I just hadn't published them yet. And so I sat down and I like actually very intentionally looked at sort of like what was popular at the moment and what tropes people were talking about. This was in 2018, and I didn't publish it until this year. So of course a lot of that is changed. Yeah. So I sat down and like I crafted a story very purposefully off of things that I saw going on in pop culture, themes that were bouncing around the romance world at the time. But I also can't follow rules very well now that I've given myself permission to not follow rules. And so like, like the Van Birch incident is a rock star book, but it's the woman who's the rock star, not the dude. And, and the person who has like a lot of the rock star stuff always has like substance abuse to it. The person who has substance abuse is the fake boyfriend, best friend, who's the hero of the second book. Like it's all twisted around and turned because I can't follow rules anymore. But so anyway,
But it's okay because it still works.
But yeah, so it's usually very intentional when I sit down and start forming a book. Like the project that I'm working on now is I really wanted to explore the themes of how our world is shaped by the environment that we live in and the environment that we've been brought up in, and then like how we sort of like react to that as we get older and start becoming more honest with ourselves, maybe about who we are. So I come from I grew up in a fundamentalist Christian household. Like my dad is a preacher, and like left that world at 18, but like there's still a lot of those things that I feel like I've never like still informed the decisions I made moving forward as an adult, even after I had separated myself from that world. And so like the hero from the book that from the books that I'm writing now, it's going to be a duet that'll come out in the spring. He starts off like he's an outreach minister for like one of those big non-denominational churches. That's very evangelical based.
Yeah.
So, and he's married, which is my other favorite thing about it, which is probably going to get me in trouble because the heroine is not his wife. So,
so books are about to take that boundary and push it and piss some people off and make everybody else love it.
But and that's I like that. Yes, I am pushing that boundary about like, well, what is the propriety and the expectations versus like how we've been informed by outside influences as to who we are and how we're supposed to behave. And so that's what this book plays with on a very abstract level. On a baser level, it is a very frustrating slow burn, I'm sure, with a cliffhanger, which is also probably going to get me in trouble. I don't know. Because it's a duet, that's what it's supposed to be.
I say, well, a cliffhanger is acceptable if it's gonna, be a quicker release into book 2, and you don't leave book 2 as a cliffhanger, then I'm perfectly okay with that.
They're gonna come out a month apart, so cliffhanger, happily ever after at the end of book 2. Like that's
okay.
How it's gonna be.
So, because you actually like want to talk about different things going on, do you do more research on what you're wanting to talk about versus the story, or like outline the story first? How does your process work with something like that?
So I don't outline in physical form. Like I don't write down anything. I basically do it mostly in my head because I tend to mull stories over for a long time before I actually start writing them. So I kind of know, I might write down details. Like I think for Van Birch, I like wrote down all of the characters' names and like their profession and like in their background, just so I could keep that straight, because we were dealing with starting a trilogy and knowing I was going to have, 6 protagonists to keep track of who are all going to have a large part in the story. But I think that's the most outlining I've ever done was just like having a page of who these characters are. But mostly I just sort of mull it over into my head, and every now and then I might like journal a little bit about who I think they are, what struggles I think that they're moving through. Mm-hmm. But yeah, most of my research is usually centered around the themes that I'm hoping to discuss. So, or like events that get encountered. For Haunted Attraction, I read a lot about tarot and witchcraft and ghosts, even though like that's a very small part of the book. Well, the ghosts are a big part of the book, but like how they ended up dealing with the ghosts at the end, and like there's never any actual overt tarot in the book, but one of the characters is a tarot reader. So like
you never know where you're gonna need to put something in there.
Right. So yeah, so it was more of, I will research things that are important to the characters. For like Alex from Sparkle and Shine, I looked into a lot of different jewelry making techniques. And I knew some because of my old position was actually my office job. I was actually a curator for a gift store and I worked like one-on-one with artists to develop products. So I knew a little bit, okay. But so like a lot of things will stem from my base knowledge. Like Ethan and Juliet, I basically didn't have to do any research because I had just basically been pregnant for the last 3 years and had been working with, like, yeah. I had come from that world, and I'd already read all the books. So like I had already done that research, which is basically why I set that, why the characters are OB-GYN and a midwife. But for like, I did a lot of research for the books that I'm working on now, with more tarot, more witchcraft, and then also taking a look back at, I have brought a lot of the evangelical mindset and things back into, like I have that in me from when I grew up, but then I also talked to a lot of people. There's actually like a Facebook group called Ex-Evangelical, about people who have left that world. Okay. And have like sort of deconstructed their religious beliefs. So I talked to a lot of people in that Facebook group and participated in that, and then also like read some books by people who are considered like I don't know.
I know what you're trying to say, like the gatekeeper basically of that, like the ones that are known.
They're the cool Christians.
Yeah.
I still have my own issues with that on a whole nother level. But I read a lot. I read a lot of stuff related to that to just sort of get myself back in that place where I could write about a church and write about people who work at that church, and then also on the other side have people who have like that sort of same reaction as I do. It's like, no, make me go there. So
but also there's like, as you're a kid, there's certain things that you're not going to remember as an adult, or you're going to see differently. So you do have to kind of do the research. Even if that even was your world, there's always going to be aspects you don't remember or know how it works.
Well, and everybody has different experiences, even if there's touchstones that are similar.
But no, I just got curious because, like I said, I've read only 3 so far out of the books. I haven't read the Incident series yet because I want them all out with your books, because I'm like, okay, I read The Haunted Attraction, I read The Other Lane, and then once I realized that there was a book before The Other Lane, I was like, okay, now I gotta go read When Abe Met Lane. And so now I'm like, to try again. I was like waiting, even though there were a few months in between. I was like, okay, I can wait. Like, but in the back of my head, I'm sitting here thinking, and like your characters were getting mixed up with mine, because I was like, I really want to be reading this book, but I'm writing my book. So I have determined I'm waiting until they all come out, and then I'm just gonna mass read them, kind of like binge watching a TV show.
That sounds like a blast. I love doing that with authors. Like, I like finding an author and then just like reading their entire backlist.
Yeah.
Backlist.
I absolutely hate waiting a year now to read any book that I know, which is bad because I'm doing that. I publish a book a year, but like authors that I love that I know they do that, I'm like, I don't want to wait.
Yeah. Oh, I know. It's like torture.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of why I was curious, like how you do it, because I have themes in my books that I want to discuss and I want to talk about. So most of my research is not on what I'm going to write in the book, but about the gods and about the certain story I want to retell and about the things I want to touch on, and just to make sure that I know everything about that so that I can portray it correctly in the book. Mm-hmm. And because yours, you have the standalones, but they're series like me, like it makes me curious how other people work on that. Because some people are straight outliners, but I'm like, I don't need to know the story. I already have it in my head how I want it to go. And I'm always plotting in my head a chapter or 2 before. But yeah, you have to know the integral stuff that you're going to put in with the story to make the story good. So now, because we are both, family oriented with daytime jobs, I have to ask, what does your schedule look like? Trying to write around it all.
So my schedule has been ever changing with the pandemic, because I have 3 kids. They're all in school, and there hasn't been a regular schedule for more than a few weeks at a time, just like because my two youngest kiddos are on the spectrum, and so like we're figuring out their schooling on top of the therapies and things that they need, and doing it safely has been an ever-changing, all semester long, it has been an ever-changing schedule of, are we going to school, are we staying home, when do we have, and then also like my work schedule, since I work in the service industry, it's the amount of hours that I've had, I went from being a full-time like manager to just being like a bartender server, so that I could devote more time to my kids. But then the amount of hours I've had has been like going up and down based off of what the county regulations currently are, and
Yeah, this year is definitely not the year for schedules.
So I mean, as a mom, I feel like a lot of the times you're just squeezing in words whenever you can. Mm-hmm. Which definitely, like, I used to, especially when the kids were real young, I would write on my phone a lot. I would just have, like, I would draft in Google Docs so I could go back and forth between my computer and my phone really easily. I don't do that as much anymore. The kids are a little bit older. They're a little bit more independent. They have, sometimes when they're not in the house, or when they're, doing their own thing, I can sit down at my computer and write a little bit. Most of the time I write late at night, like after the kids are in bed. So if I'm if I'm not working, like that's when I will sit down and get a majority of my writing time in. And I'm a total, like, it's awful. I'm a night owl. So like, I don't sleep as much as I should.
What's sleep? I don't know that word.
Yeah. So, but for me, it's worth it. I'd rather stay up until 1:00 in the morning writing my book than not get the progress that I want to see and then get a full 8 hours of sleep. So just more coffee. Stay, it's fine. It's great.
What would we do without coffee?
Oh goodness. Amazing.
There have been days I would write straight through Saturday all the way into Sunday and then just pass out after my live stream on Sunday. Like, otherwise, if I went to sleep at like 3 or 4 in the morning, I have been late so many times. I'm just like, why sleep? I'll just wait. I'll be fine. More coffee. Now, what is, I guess, the most important piece of information you'd give to either the 10 years younger version of you, or somebody in your same situation 10 years ago?
So 10 years ago, I was finishing school, coming out of an abusive relationship, and just 100% was in survival mode. And I think that the biggest takeaway is just like, and that's actually like one of the very main reasons why I decided how I formulate my books is that I needed a heroine who modeled like the bravery and the agency that I needed to move forward on my own and stepping out of an existence where I felt like I didn't have any choices. And I wanted somebody to be like, you have choices, you have power to make your life move the way you wanted to move. And and leaving that first marriage was like biggest.
It's hard, yeah.
It was,
it's a jolt.
It was the biggest, probably one of the biggest, most difficult things I'd ever done. Until like I realized that I had to like actually move on after that and like I was the one who was making all of my decisions. Mm-hmm. And like that was really difficult to give myself permission to step into. So I think that, recognizing that you have choices and that you have, that there is room for you to grow and there are people who will help you if you ask. And that's one thing that I always, I was afraid to ask for help from anybody. I was afraid to be vulnerable because I had been shut down so much. Mm-hmm. And told, like I was still operating from that mindset where I don't have worth. Somebody coming up and being like, hey, I know it's hard, it sucks, but you are valuable and that people want to hear your voice. Yeah. And what you have to say and what you think about yourself is very important. And so you should use your voice and you should realize that you have the ability to make things happen for yourself. Like you don't have to wait for everybody else's permission. And if you need permission, here is your permission to move forward and do, follow your dreams, do what you want to do. Because it took me sort of years to kind of come out of that space and realize that like, oh.
Yeah. I think that's definitely something they don't tell you, when you're in any type of abusive long-term situation. Like, it doesn't matter whether it's just physical or just emotional or both. Like, it takes a mental toll on you, and you just kind of curl up in on yourself just to survive. And if you do have children involved, then you're protecting them versus you, and you lose yourself whether you mean to or want to or not. And you don't want to, I feel like, especially as mothers, we don't want to feel like we can't take care of everything because we've got this kid to protect, and you don't want to give that vulnerability, anybody, a chance to take control of it. Yeah, so like I totally, I get that. It took me probably, I'd say 8 years after I left my emotionally abusive ex, and I thought I was standing up for myself through the relationship, and I thought I was doing so great, but afterwards you're like, holy crap, why didn't I see this? How did I become this? Like, yeah, I mean, I totally I totally get that. It takes time, but yeah, like giving yourself permission to not have to take control of everything and be the answer for everything within yourself. I think asking for help is always the hardest part, just because you are showing your vulnerability. But I think that's why I connected with your writing, because like you do have a message, with everything. And I find that that's refreshing because I feel like I say that in my stuff, but it's not so well done because my books are so much longer. Maybe the message gets a little lost in the story. But you're in that genre, contemporary romance is probably the best genre to describe things like that and have such a meaningful story and still have that, even if it's not the first book, that happily ever after come out of it, because it's not a quick boom, 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 act scene to get to it, but it's a real evolution of the character and their growth. And I feel like you actually get some growth out of it as well. So call it therapy for yourself or for the other people, but you've done that. So I definitely see that in your story. So that makes me want to read the one you're writing even more now, because I come from that Christian indoctrination background too. So
it's coming fast. It's going to the editor real soon.
I know, I got through the editors and I'm in formatting now, and I'm like, I've got 3 months till this book comes out. Oh, I've got 2 months. Oh crap, I'm still like so far behind. Like every time I would have it on schedule again, something with COVID or with life would happen. I'd break a bone or something. It's like, this year not only hates me, it hates me bad. So was it giving yourself that permission to make those decisions the reason you chose self-publishing over traditional, or just to say screw the gatekeepers style?
It was maybe a little bit of both. I think part of me, I was just really tired of waiting. I had, been struggling to write all my life. I finally had finished books. I kind of queried a little bit with The Other Lane, but I really wasn't sure how to sell it yet. And I was having more fun like writing new books versus trying to sell that one. And so I kind of just let it sit on the back burner. And then I just started thinking about, I started doing more research into self-publishing just to see what it was like. And it was just like, I could do this and I don't have to wait. Like, I don't have to wait for somebody else to give me permission to be an author. Like, I can start on this journey now if I want to. And so, yeah, so I was like, no, and I've always been sort of the person who went the independent route anyway. When I've always like been entrepreneurial minded and, had all of these ideas for these little businesses that I could start. I actually ran like a fiber arts company for a while when I was in that place where I wasn't writing. So I was like, I can take all that knowledge that I gained about running a business, like especially an online centered business back then, and that I'm not using now, and put it towards making this happen, which is where my heart really is. So yeah, so it was a combination of like just not wanting to put up with the gatekeepers who were telling me it wasn't my time, and when I felt like it was my time, and just like realizing that I don't need anybody else's permission to do what I want to do.
Isn't that so freeing? You're like, I'm done. I'm doing it myself. What is the biggest misconception that you have? And I think I already know this, but I'm going to ask anyway. What is the biggest misconception or myth that you think there is about being an author or self-publishing that you just want to see debunked into extinction?
Okay, so honestly, I feel like that the books are, there's the obvious, like the books are subpar, that they're not like the same quality as a traditionally published book. Ridiculous. I've read so many innovative independent authors that are just brilliant, and it takes so much work.
Mm-hmm.
And that I just would love people to give more independent authors a chance, because like it was even back when I was doing in my gift shop days, like I worked for the Historical Society, so I did a lot of I read a lot of and sold a lot of historic books, like books about history, and they're all nonfiction, and stocked them on the shelves. And my supervisors, they were not in the gift shop business, they were running other parts of the Historic Society, but they were history people, so like they knew their stuff, and they were like, no self-published authors, just like bam.
Ooh.
And I was just like, well, the market is changing and this is well before I even thought about self-publishing myself. Like this is while I was still just getting back into writing.
Yeah.
But I was like, well, the market is changing and like publishers aren't investing a lot into like niche Kansas history books because they're not selling very much. So a lot of the writers that we've stopped in the past have moved into self-publishing
Mm-hmm.
because that's the only way they can get their books out there. And now I can't like, and there's people who are, but, and their idea was like, well, they're not peer reviewed if they're self-published. And I was like, but does an editor like, is like, how is I was just like, anyway. So it was one of those things where there's just a stigma between like how accurate a book can be if it's self-published versus if it's um, traditionally published. And I feel like that happens a lot with independent authors. And yeah, it's one of those things where you're holding old expectations against new emerging systems,
Mm-hmm.
which happens. I mean, that happens a lot. That's why you have like generation wars and people complaining about kids these days and all that stuff. But it's um, so when you have like bookstagrammers who only work with like publishing companies versus independent
Yeah.
authors, it's one of those things where it's like, but why though? Like I don't know.
See,
For
I
me, I
thought
read
you were gonna go straight on the gatekeepers because you've overcome that. So I like that answer. It's totally not what I thought first off,
See,
but
well,
very
and
true.
like I just don't even have time for gatekeepers anymore. So it's not even like I'm just like.
Oh, I love that. They're like out of your realm, not even there. Like I passed that. I love that.
So
Okay, so with that, because in the beginning you said you lurk and everything, but the community has been so great for you. Um, what's the one thing you wish you had known when you first started writing and started getting on YouTube?
this is something I've been actually uh, contemplating a lot lately is like how I want to show up on social media and like what I want to talk about. And I think one of the things that I had a lot, and I still sort of struggle with, is like there's one of the best things is finding author friends who are doing the same things you're doing, but then also like figuring out what your right path is and not basing the sort of marketing you do or the sort of conversations you have on what other authors in your genre are doing and how they're marketing their books. I feel like, and it's really easy, especially for me, one of the things I struggle with is defaulting into sort of coasting by on marketing especially when I'm deep into reading or writing and working on a project, because I'd
Yeah.
I'd most definitely rather be writing than
Oh yeah.
you know spending 2 hours a day working on marketing strategy and then implementing it.
Yeah.
So it's really easy to just sort of default and be like, oh, well, they're doing that. Maybe I'll try that. Maybe I'll try this. Maybe. And it's like, no, like taking the actual time to like sit down and find like what works for you, what's something you can be passionate about actually working on and moving forward with, instead of just sampling from what other people are doing. And I think that there's something to be said for trying new things, but it's also just being like trying things in an intentional way instead of just scattershotting.
Yeah.
How you approach your visibility,
Yeah.
because that's important when you're an independent author, because if people don't see you, they don't know about your books and then they won't read them.
Yeah.
But so that's yeah.
That's one thing I think that sucks about the self-publishing, but then the more you find out about traditional, the less they're doing it these days as well. And that's the marketing. Like, I'm so horrible about talking about myself because I feel like I'm just being selfish and like narcissistic and like, but that's the only way to sell your books. It's the only way to create your brand is you have to talk about you in the book. And here I am coming out on book 2, and I don't think I've ever actually done videos or anything about what the book's are about. I'm just like, I expect everybody to like them. Like, yeah, that's not the way that works.
Yeah, I actually just posted a post on Instagram this morning about how, sometimes I default into talking about tropes or swooning factors, or like talking about what makes the characters appealing, instead of like actually digging into like the themes that I talk about in the book. And I was actually looking at some reviews for Ethan and Juliet, which I tend to not read my own reviews just because they're not for me, they're for readers. And I don't, if people have bad things to say about it, I don't want to know, because it's not going to change how I feel about the book or how I wrote the book, or,
Yeah, you're not going to take it down and rewrite it just based on a review.
Right. But I was looking at it just because I was trying to be more intentional about like where I'm going. And that's one of those books where I feel like I've talked about like how it's a medical romance and how it's a doctor, like the hero is a doctor, and like the things that people find it, that's a whole, doctor romance is its whole own little like subgenre, right?
Yeah.
So that appeals to people who are into the medical drama. But I haven't talked about necessarily like what you're going to find in that book on top of the romance. And so like in a lot of the reviews were like, oh wow, like I didn't expect this character to be like such a strong character. And some people are like, ugh, this isn't my kind of feminism. And and some people are like, oh my God, Alex is the worst best friend ever. And I was just like, I mean, I don't agree,
but
but it's so it was really interesting to sort of see that as I'm crafting, like thinking about like, well, maybe I need to talk a little bit more about like the fact that, in this book, the hero is an OBGYN and the heroine is a midwife. And so like talking about women's reproductive health is going to be a theme in the book, because that's the world that these two live in.
Yeah.
And so like, I work in everything from from happy births to sad births to maternal, like, there's themes that touches on like maternal death. And now I'm thinking maybe I need to go back and make a trigger warning for the beginning of this book, because when I published it, trigger warnings weren't on my radar. And then there's also an abortion storyline, because I'm looking at a holistic view of women's reproductive health. And so like there's on top of the story and the drama that's going on. And so it's like, maybe I should talk about that more, like those sorts of elements of my stories, versus just that it's an opposites attract medical romance with an OB-GYN and a midwife, so.
Yeah, I don't know anything other than YouTube. So the Instagram and the Pinterest and Snapchats and all this stuff, I'm like, I'm going to have to force myself to learn them and make more time with them, because I don't understand how people do these beautiful layouts. And like, you had the other lane with the coffee cup next to it and things like that a couple months ago, and I was like, oh, that's so pretty. It goes so well with the cover. I have no clue how she did that. I'm done. Like, next.
It's really just my white desk, and I just put stuff on it and take pictures. And sometimes there's still coffee rings on my white desk.
And that's just something I don't have. Like, I live in a camper, so the prettiness is not happening. Like, essential things are all that's here. Now, I want to ask you my signature question that I ask everybody. Now, what is a favorite book that you have that has been adapted into a movie, and which one did you like better?
So one of the most pivotal books and this is actually one that I read in school that I think is really interesting, or that is really good, and it's gonna be like kind of a cliche answer, is I took a whole class on the Brontes when I was 19, and then basically that class fucking changed my life. Sorry, that's not good. I just realized it. Anyway, so basically that class changed my life, and then because the writing was really focused on these women in the 19th century taking their lives into their own hands. And so like, and Jane Eyre is going to be like the Jane Eyre is probably the most well written out of all of their books. And I love that book to death, because Jane is such an independent character who stands up for her morals, has boundaries. And even though I think Rochester is a dick.
Yeah.
And like, you can make the Byronic hero argument or whatever, but I think he's awful as a hero. but I love Jane's journey. And every time, like when she gets to the end and she's like, "Dear reader, I married him," like you feel her triumph and her happiness. And so anyway, so that's probably one of my favorite books ever written, just for those reasons. And then I also love the 2005 adaptation with Ruth Wilson and Toby Stevens.
I think that's my favorite so far. Yeah.
I mean, I still am always going to probably prefer the book to any movie, just because there's usually more nuance to it. But I haven't like trying to think about like more recent books that have been made into movies, and I haven't watched a lot.
It doesn't have to be recent. It's whatever.
Yeah. So anyway, but if you're gonna watch a Jane Eyre adaptation, like that miniseries is my favorite. I love it. I'd actually like Toby Stevens actually makes me like Rochester.
No, I feel like as writers that has a whole different type answer to the question, because everybody's always like, what's your favorite movie or what's your favorite book? But it says something about an author from our standpoint to like most people either like the book or the movie. But as authors, like we can tell what they took from one to the other, and you're like, was it well done? And it's not just well, that was great. The special effects were awesome. Like we can tell from a different side, a different creative spectrum of that. So I love hearing everybody's answers on that. Now, what is the next book that's coming out? Because you had The Betrayal Incident come out October 29th of 2020. So what time frame did you say your next books are? Do we have names or anything you can tell us about?
So my next project that's going to be coming out is The Lightning Crashes Duet. It's about the married preacher who falls in love with a woman who is not his wife. She is Rachel, who's the heroine, is a widow and a bartender who is sort of coming up out of that dark place, having lost a husband. She's in that emerging place where she's lost her husband and she's been living in grief, and she's sort of remembering that she has her own life finally again, and like sort of starting to move on. And anyway, and that's sort of where the books start. And the first one is called Temptation, and the second one is called Absolution, because it plays sort of with that religious theme right there. Fun fact, Rachel. So if you've read Haunted Attraction, which was my newest book, the ghost story, Rachel is Naomi from Haunted Attraction's roommate. And so Naomi will be in these books as well,
Nice.
which I get excited about because I love Naomi to death. She's so much fun to write. So they're not a series, but they are, they share, they're companions, I guess. They share.
I like that though. Like that's one thing I love about my books is you can get glimpses of people in different books, and it gives you a better world about them. So
yeah. So yes, those will. I can't remember the exact dates right now, but the Temptation will be coming out at the end of March, and Absolution will be coming out at the end of April. So it'll be about 4 weeks between releases on those books.
Yay! So we won't have to wait that long this time.
No, I don't want to leave with cliffhanger too long. That's just mean. Like can't do. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's another set of books that I've been writing at the same time, so that they come out together.
Okay. So tell us, I'll have everything in the show notes and the description down below, but for those listening, where can we find you? Where are you active most often? Give us all that deep.
Okay. Well, I am probably active most often on Instagram, which you can find me at Marla Holt Author. That's sort of where I do my daily check-ins. I also have a Facebook group called Marla's Romance Mavens, which I sometimes forget about, but am trying to be more active in.
I'm so bad.
And I have a and I have a YouTube channel, which I also sometimes forget about, just because sitting down and making videos when it's actually quiet has been difficult in pandemic life. But I'm trying to be a little bit more active there as well. And then I have like marlaholt.com is a great place to just go and look at what books I have out. Or also on Amazon. All of my books are on Kindle Unlimited currently. So you can find me on Amazon to read ebooks or order your paperback.
All right, like I said, I will have all the links in the show notes down below. So I definitely, I gotta say, between now and in March, people need to go read Haunted Attractions so that they get a little bit of Naomi in the new series, in the new duet. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. But I love each of the series. I love the lessons that are in them, and I absolutely fall in love with all the characters. So I personally am looking forward to the Incident series now that it's all done and I can go binge read it over the holidays. So if you haven't gotten it, people, go get them. They're awesome. And follow this lady. Is there anything that I did not touch on that you would like to?
I don't think so. I think that's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of stuff, but I always want to give you the last word in case I did forget anything. All right. Well, thank you for being my guest, and I feel like I'm fangirling over you. Like, I love the book, so I can't say enough.
Thank you so much.
I feel like out of all the indies I've read, you do contemporary romance probably the best.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Well, I just write. I just write where my heart is telling me to go. So I really appreciate that you are finding value in it, and thank you so much for having me on.
Not a problem.
It's been a lot of fun.
All right. Well, until next time, guys, happy writing, happy life. Bye. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Afterthought Podcast. Remember that we post episodes the second Saturday of every month. And if you'd like to subscribe so that you can watch any of the previous episodes, make sure you go and do that. All the descriptions are down below for the Audible and the YouTube, depending on which one you are on. And you can head over to www.amberscraft.com to see all the links, and if you'd like to be a guest, to fill out a form. So make sure you go and subscribe to my newsletter to find out who is coming next. I have tons of lineups for 2021 coming, and I'm super excited to show them all with you. So until the next episode, guys, happy life, happy writing. Bye now.